All right, so welcome to a new episode of the Fascia Masters podcast. So my name is Quinn Castling. I'm the VP of Block Therapy, and we have, of course, Deanna Hansen here, who is the founder of Fluid Isometrics and Block Therapy. I wouldn't be here unless it was for Deanna. And we're going to be talking about posture versus cellular alignment. This is a discussion that we had fairly recently because ever since I got a little bit more on TikTok, I realized, well, you see so many people's opinions and perspectives on posture. Does it really even matter anymore? Which is something insane for us to think. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get deeper into the podcast. But there's a big difference between just some person saying, oh, here's my posture, but here's my cellular alignment. And really that's what we're about. We're about cellular alignment. So before we even dive in deeper to that, let's just talk about the definition of posture.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for getting everything set up. I'm so excited to be doing this with you. And I also would not be here if it were not for you. So thank you.
Wow.
Okay, so first of all, posture is really the outer expression of our physical body in this moment. And it's really the expression of how the forces have affected our fascia up until now. So as an example, we're dominant on one side. So I'm right-handed. I think 70% of the population are right-handed. So the right-handed person tends to, now these are generalizations, there's always exceptions to the rule, but tends to collapse more on the left side of their body so that they can keep that right side free for action. My natural fallout posture is to shift my body weight over to the left side when I'm standing if I'm not conscious of being in correct position. So the reason that this matters is that over time, what happens is the fascia is here to support us structurally. So as we start tipping off balance, adhesions are created between the layers of fascia to create stability in the body. So if I continue on this path lifelong of always shifting over to that one side or always being in front of the computer in a collapsed way, I'm going to create these grooves in my fascia that's going to cause me to essentially always fall in to that space. And that matters because as we fall in further and further, more adhesions develop because we keep increasing those grooves. We keep tipping further off balance. And if we didn't have these adhesions developing, we would tip over and fall flat on our face. And obviously, we're not designed to do that. The body has bioregulatory mechanisms in it, and it's really the fascia responding to these forces. So when we're talking about posture, that's really what we're looking at is how a person's body is positioned in this moment. And that's an accumulation of their life up until now. So the difference between that and cellular alignment, the goal is that we have, well, first of all, we have trillions of cells in the body. And I think we talked on our last podcast that the fascia is the skin to each and every cell. Just like we have skin on the body, fascia is the skin to the cell. And each cell is interconnected through this beautiful system, the fascia. So the goal is that each and every one of our trillions of cells is sitting exactly where it's supposed to be, because what that does is it creates optimal space. And space is the goal, because if there's optimal space within and around the cell, now we have the most surface area of that cell membrane for optimal absorption of nutrients into the cell, as well as the removal of toxins away from the cell. And when there's optimal space, there's ease of flow. When there's ease of flow, the body's happy. It's not having to give us signals of pain or anxiety. It doesn't have cells that are hungry and starving or areas of toxicity because of a lack of flow. When we have a lack of flow, that's when we start seeing dis-ease in the body. So when we're talking about cellular alignment with fascia decompression, the goal is that we release the pattern of fascia that we're currently in. And through our process, we pull the cells back to their rightful position so that we can put the space back into the body that time has taken away and create that ease of flow for health.
Wow, that's such a detailed explanation, but it makes a lot of sense because if somebody's just wanting to research posture, they're just thinking of how they're just going to make some slight adjustments throughout the day or how they're sitting and think that's going to fix all problems. And don't get me wrong, that's definitely going to help, but you also need to unlock the pattern of your fascia, how it's holding you out of alignment, to actually reposition your cells. And then you own that by adapting the proper posture or sitting and standing correctly, moving yourself throughout the day properly. So a lot of people out there talk about, and there's even like research articles have come out, which is a little mind-blowing to me, but this is what's really cool, because we'll be able to explain this. So some are saying if you are seated at a desk all day and you are more in that forward slouched posture for 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, I forget exactly the duration, and then people that are in, let's call this perfect erect upright posture for 10, 20, 30 days, they were actually saying that the people who have better posture, more erect posture, accumulated more neck pain in that duration compared to those who are slouched. But we have a very good explanation to this because we see this every day and it makes total sense. Do you want to explain that?
Absolutely. So first of all, whatever age you're starting to become aware of posture, you'll have to be somewhat conscious. So even if you're a kid, say 8 or 9, and you're becoming aware of posture, you already have the accumulation of the forces acting on your fascia system up until that point. And the thing is, no one's breathing properly from the get-go. In the past, when you used to see babies diaphragmatically breathing, you'd see their belly moving up and down when they were breathing. And then over time, pain, fear, and stress cause us to reactively hold the breath. And then that changes the breathing pattern to focus more of the muscles of the upper chest. Now, the challenge with that is the diaphragm is this plate of muscle that moves up and down in the body. And when we're conscious diaphragmatic breathers, this is a strong muscle. And this is the foundation for everything up the chain. So if we're not conscious of diaphragmatic breathing and we're breathing through these muscles, now this foundation becomes weak. And the first thing that happens is we start to fall into that internal core space. So as we fall into that internal core space, now the weight of the head gets pulled forward and we magnetically seal in this alignment. And already, as soon as we aren't breathing consciously from the beginning, we create these grooves of collapse into the body. Basically, the space is getting taken away as we fall in. So if I'm 10 years old, 20 years old, 50 years old, whatever age I am at this point, if I've been this way, which we all have, and now I'm trying to sit up straight, I've got this pull trying to pull me, not trying to, it will, because again, it's a 2,000 pound per square inch force. It's a magnetic seal. So if you're fighting that, you're going to fatigue and the muscles are going to become exhausted, which is going to cause pain. So for the neck, it might feel better in the moment to be slouched and collapsed because this is your natural posture. But what's that doing to the organs? Now we've got all of this space in through here under the weight of the upper body collapsing in and displacing those internal organs. So my neck might not be sore, but I might have gut issues. I might have diabetes because my pancreas organ isn't getting proper energy. I might have fatty liver disease. I mean, there's any number of issues. I might have high blood pressure because now I'm strangling the aorta. So when we're looking at just simply pain, we need to really look at the function of the entire body and what's happening with our posture. So just because my neck might not be hurting doesn't mean I'm not creating problems inside my body from not sitting up correctly.
Absolutely.
So the goal is that we have to understand first the first pillar of our system, which is creating space that we've lost over time. So we can talk further about that later, but that's the difference between understanding posture and cellular alignment and how pain affects us. Yes, it might not be as detrimental on our neck pain in the moment, but it doesn't mean it's helping our health in any way, shape, or form.
Totally. Yeah, that's a very good explanation and a good way to explain the other health issues that can follow because now you're on a bit of a downward spiral, unfortunately. And that still doesn't mean you're not going to get neck pain in the future. That was just a study based off of however many people. So we really need to understand that the connective tissue is always gripping, pulling us down, 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 down. And we're all unique on how our tissue grips and holds. So think of it, let's try to think of an analogy here. So we're pulled forward all the time. So now what we're trying to do is literally yank the rib cage up if that's even what they're doing, and pull the head and the neck back. And now they're just fighting this tug of war. So now, yeah, no wonder you have neck pain. You're literally in a tug of war for the duration of that study, 10, 20, 30 days, whatever. Of course you're going to have neck pain. That's like you and I trying to do an arm wrestle and hold that for 30 days and be like, oh, yeah, my rotator cuff of my arm is tired. Like, of course it is. So that's why so many people who do block therapy or fascia decompression feel like they can just sit so much easier. There's not that pain. And in yoga, they call that effortless effort because they're like, wow, I'm just sitting here and I'm not having to fight against that. So right now, if you're sitting, just see, like try to bring your body into that proper alignment. Bring your rib cage into that neutral alignment in that brace core position. Bring your shoulders back and down into that slight protracted state. Now bring your head and your neck a little bit more back so that you're aligned, and envision that a string is pulling you up towards the ceiling. Now, does that feel easy for you or is that challenging? And it's probably challenging, but when you start releasing the connective tissue, you're like, wow, I literally don't even feel like I'm fighting against that anymore. And of course, that takes time. It's not going to happen necessarily with one session. Sure, you can feel a release, but once you start really following the system and doing days in a row, a week in a row, it's totally different. So that would be interesting if we could do a study like that, where we had some people where they do not do any fascia decompression or block therapy, people that do block therapy or fascia decompression maybe for a week or 21 days, and then they try to sit in the proper alignment and the improper alignment for that duration.
Well, and what's really fascinating is I'm doing assessments all the time. So I get before photos, we give them a prescription, and then we get after photos. And what's fascinating is we really need to understand the cause sites and the pain sites and where the fascia grips most forcefully onto bone. And it's the limbs, because the limbs are the furthest from the engine. So this is where the fascia freezes the most. So what's always amazing to see is we have a body and they're standing in the before photo and you can see the collapse and the twisting, as we all do. And we always focus on the foundation because the calves and the feet are the furthest from the engine. So they're going to be the most frozen. So when I initially prescribed, for example, the 21-day pelvis, legs, and feet program, which really doesn't even touch the upper body, when I get these after photos, what's fascinating is the entire upper body has changed alignment without even doing any work there. Right. So imagine if I had your arm and I took your arm and I held it. So this is along the lines of what you were just talking about, like, doing an arm wrestle. But if I had your arm and I was twisting it for 30 days, you're going to have shoulder pain, because now I'm forcing this. So if I go to a treatment and I get my shoulder worked on, you might feel good for a moment because you'll increase that circulation, but that's not going to take away what's causing the pain. The pain is me gripping and twisting. If I let go of your arm and the shoulder can come back, now there's no need for those muscles to be constantly firing. So now they might be sore for a little while, but then now they have the potential to heal properly because you've released the anchor or the cause site to what was causing that. And that's the difference when people are talking just generally about posture and you're trying to take your body from the pattern of fascia that you have into correct alignment. If you haven't done any creating space or inflating space, of course, you're going to feel pain. You're going to get fatigued because you're fighting again a magnetic seal that is just crazy.
100%. Great explanation.
Thanks.
Let's send that to him. Sorry, not in an arrogant way. It's just fascia. It's
just an understanding. It's a different understanding.
And exactly. Fascia within itself is still very new, I feel. Obviously, people are now waking up to the research and its important role. So yeah, if we just jump to the third pillar, there's a reason why that is number 3. You have to first create, then inflate space, and then maintain space. Maintaining the space is the postural component or the cellular alignment. So what about people who are dominant on one side, which we all are? If you're not, like, good on you. That's incredible. What is that called actually, by the way?
Ambidextrous. when you are both right and left-handed.
Yeah. So that's kind of the goal
in
a way.
It's absolutely the goal. And funny enough, when I'm looking at bodies, I find that the left-handed person is actually more balanced because we live in that right-handed world. So if you're left-handed, you have to actually adapt differently, and you're more inclined to use both sides of your body. Where, until I started learning this, actually, until this technique began for me, which for some reason happened in my left hand, I was so right side dominant. I was so twisted, being a power hitter for volleyball for years growing up and all of these different things. Like, I was so incredibly twisted, and I had so much pain and so many adhesions that I had to work through my body. I mean, I still do, but I've come a long way. But when we are constantly overusing that one side, again, we're going to keep increasing the grooves and the pattern that we're negatively falling into. So one of the best things that we can do is we can start understanding how to utilize the other side of the body. So, for example, in our membership, in one of the programs, the 30-day posture reset, one of the prompts every day is to change one habit at a time. So, for example, if I'm always reaching and lifting my cup with my right hand, today, just do that one action with your left hand. Let's not try to change everything all at once, because that's impossible to do. We need to do one little thing at a time. And honestly, the third pillar is the hardest to change, because when we're moving, we're not as conscious of what we're doing as when we're sitting and we're aware. It's one thing to go into proper standing or sitting posture because we're thinking about it. But I'm to blame as well. I call it the lock and talk. When I'm standing talking to somebody, I often still find myself hyperextending my knees, because that's the natural thing to do. I'm in my head when I'm talking. I'm not physically in my body. So I catch myself falling into these negative alignments. Now, as you get more and more aligned, your body gives you those cues and signals, though. It's quite fascinating. Like, your cells really do speak to you. And once you start to listen to them, then you pick up on those cues more. So another thing to do, like if we're vacuuming, like pick those habits that you do every day, or those actions that you do every day. And if you could start doing it with the opposite side, then you start to create a balance in the grooves of the fascia, and we can start to undo the damage that time has done to our body and release those adhesions. So the third pillar is the hardest, because changing how we move and use our body all the time, we want to use our body in a balanced, symmetrical way. But again, because we're dominant, it's not our nature to do that. So to be able to bring that conscious awareness into doing things, and it's as simple as every time you open the fridge, change the hand. Every time you grab for something out of the cupboard, change to the other hand. And I remember, it was yoga.
Like vacuuming, as you mentioned a lot. Just start doing everything more, brushing your teeth with your left hand. Or if you're left-handed, of course, to your right hand.
And here's a fascinating thing, because brushing your hair, like for my hair being long, it was hard for me to start brushing it with my left hand, but funny, because I always had this little like up shot of my bang on this one side, and I would always brush over here. And then when I started brushing with my left hand, suddenly that changed. Like, it's fascinating.
That's weird.
Well, and what is really, really neat is I was having a bowl of soup, and I started eating it with my right hand like I typically do. And I'm like, no. But I'm like, soup is a different thing, because you're going to spill if it's not perfect. So the adjustments that I had to make in my body, and I was observing how my feet were planted differently on the ground, to just be able to take that spoon and bring that liquid into my mouth on the spoon without spilling it. Like, and if we're not conscious, these grooves, they just keep adding up and getting stronger and thicker and bigger and pulling us further down. So those little prompts are really, really helpful to create change. Even when I'm sitting cross-legged, my nature is always to do the opposite leg first. So then I always want to switch. I always want to feel like I'm a little less comfortable than comfortable, because we're going to do, and it was yoga when I first learned this. They said, like, clasp your hand. Now change the clasp. Never go into the place of comfort. Get comfortable with the discomfort until you don't even recognize what's uncomfortable anymore.
Right. What's the right, how did I used to always do this?
Yeah.
What was my favorable side?
Yes.
Interesting. So, and that will obviously come with time, but even some of the best athletes in the world are playing asymmetrical sports. Almost every sport really is asymmetrical to some extent. Obviously, I would say like racket sports and golf are more asymmetrical because you're constantly swinging in one direction. I think golf is probably one of the most asymmetrical because you're literally only swinging in that one way. But let's say in tennis or badminton, you can do a backhanded shot or a right.
Yeah.
However, you're still using your right hand or your dominant hand. So a lot of people look at these athletes as the epitome of health or peak performance and just some of the best athletes in the world. But really, it's interesting to analyze that from a fascia perspective. So what we would do is, like, the thing is, we're not trying to say, oh, don't play tennis or sports. I love playing sports. I play golf minimum 2 times a week when I'm allowed to with our weather. But I have to be conscious enough outside of when I'm playing golf to strengthen myself in the opposite way. And that can be very challenging. It can be very awkward. But if you're constantly being twisted in one direction for hours on end, and now you're practicing hours on end, and now you're playing that sport in front of millions of people, like, that's incredible what it's doing for your body. So
in my opinion, it's pretty much aging you. I won't say twice as fast, but I mean, if you think about it, let's pretend that there's equal cells on the right and the left side of the body. So if I'm using my right side 70%, or that energy side 70% of my life, then it's going to fatigue so much faster. If you've got 100 people in your company and only, 70 of them are working and 30 of them aren't doing anything, or 50 of them are working and 50 aren't doing anything, they're going to exhaust. These are a burden. So that's kind of what's going on. We have all these cells that are here for movement and to allow us to thrive and function and do all these wonderful things. But the more we use one side of the body, the faster we're using up our life force. I think we talked in the last one about a candle. And if that candle wick is perfectly in the center and, there's no wind happening on the flame, it will use the fullest potential of its life until all of the wax is gone. But if that wick is slightly off center and there might be a little bit of a breeze coming on it, now we're going to get like the heat only burning one side. And then that candle might burn out when only a third of its potential has been used. So for the elite athlete, they are using their body at such a high level. So in the moments when they're at peak capacity, sure, they might have the best endurance. They might be the strongest in their certain specific ways. But what does that mean over time? Over time, that's going to be a very different body than the person that isn't overusing one side of their body to that degree and taking different kinds of care. So
what if, for example, golf, you can play golf almost until you die in a way, which is pretty crazy. Like, my grandfather played golf probably until he was 80, just before 80, which is incredible. So what if you're more in your peak performance, let's say in your 20s, 30s, 40s or so, and then you obviously will slowly start to die down a bit and your swing won't be as powerful. You might not be playing as many rounds, but you're still playing. So what if you're just still playing golf until you're 80? Do you think that would be more beneficial than doing a hard stop? Like, let's say you played and then you're like, when I'm 45, I'm done. I'm not playing golf anymore. Do you think that would be more beneficial than continuing to rotate in that direction, but not to the same extent and same capacity until you're, let's say, 75?
I think there's a whole bunch of factors. First of all, you have to look at the enjoyment factor. If you love playing golf, there's so much about thriving when we love an activity. So to say, I'm going to stop this activity, my dad, he played golf. He loved it until he wasn't good at playing it. And then he stopped because it was more frustrating for him to play it with his body where he wasn't able to do and perform how he used to in the past. So he would just get angry because, he had these experiences where he was an exceptional golfer. He even played against Arnold Palmer once and he beat him on one hole. So, your grandfather, my daddy, was a great golfer as well. And this is the other grandfather that we're talking about than the one you mentioned. But there's a bunch of things that you need to consider. But I do believe with your grandfather that he also took yoga. He also played hockey. He did other things. He wasn't only golfing.
Right.
And he was an active person and he walked. So he he looked after himself in a whole number of ways. So it wasn't just golf. So again, we're all different. We all have
There's too many variables.
There's too many variables. And the most important one is how you breathe. Like it really is. Because if he's a good breather and he's a diaphragmatic breather, that's going to go a long way in the repair, in the feeding of the fuel to all the cells doing that activity. But for somebody that doesn't have a connection to that breath and they're always twisting in one way and then they wind up, that's going to, again, impact the organ health. And that's a very different situation. So there's too many factors to even look at when you're talking about individuals. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're looking after our cellular health. And in order to do that, we have to keep those adhesions at bay. We need to make sure we're pumping blood and oxygen to all of the cells in the body. And we won't be doing that if we're just not ignoring, symmetry and alignment. And that's the focus of what we do here.
Crazy. Absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of athletes, actually, I'm sure probably almost majority of them, if they're playing any very intense pro league and then they stop, which a lot of them do a hard stop. Like if you're playing football or hockey, you're kind of done when you're done. You're going to be riddled with pain. And even if, I don't want to jump. I don't want to get too complicated here. But let's say you're playing golf and you just do a hard stop at 50. I would say it's probably more beneficial to continue to play until you're 75, but at a less extent than it is to do a hard stop. Because now your connective tissue is not getting any movement, because movement can help release or keep the connective tissue fluid. But when you have adhesions that are so powerful, of course, movement won't be able to release those anymore. That's where you need the fascia decompression technique. So really the simplest solution is what? Just try to keep taking care of your fascia throughout your professional league and after the fact. And it's really easy to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to training in different sports because again, it's what we do all the time that adds up. So if you're always only doing one sport, you create grooves in your body. But if I play a bunch of different sports, then I'm using my body in a whole bunch of different ways. I mean, I remember when I was really athletic and then I went and I did rowing. And because that wasn't a movement that my body was used to, for as fit as I was extremely sore the next day because my body wasn't used to doing that. But then, you get used to doing it and then you don't get that same kind of stiffness the next day. So you can be extremely fit, but then try something new and be really, I remember when we went and we did Pilates. And I mean,
with one of our instructors.
That's
yes.
right. And it was different movements. So as much as I can do tons of things with my body, these are movements I hadn't specifically done and I could feel it the next day.
Absolutely.
So those things matter. But I think your comment though about like something like hockey and football, those are also very different sports. Like the
you're
impact.
Getting smoked in the head.
So that's a whole different level of
let's not go down that rabbit hole. So really it comes down to balancing the body out. Let's just kind of wrap it back to there and make it simple. Balance the body out. So if you're always in one direction, and we're not saying stop, like keep doing it. I'm not going to stop playing golf, but I don't just play golf, right?
And that's where things like, yoga, for example, are really beneficial because when you're doing yoga postures, it's about creating symmetry. We go into back bends to offset the constant forward action that we're in when we're doing other activity all day long. So those kinds of disciplines take your body into the ranges in a symmetrical way so that you can squeeze out the toxins from the areas that, if I'm sitting like this all the time, twisted over, then I've got all this compression on my left side and I've got all this ballooning in my back over here. So if I don't address that in any way, that's going to continue to accumulate. So when we're really active and moving the body in all ranges equally on both sides, like these disciplines do, ours as well, then you're getting that opportunity to address all of the cells in the body and give them that cleaning and feeding that they need so that they can be healthy.
Would you say that posture is one of the largest factors in just pain in general?
100%. Because what we do all the time adds up to create the posture that we have right now. And if we don't change it, we're only going to continue to fall further and further and further into those grooves. And depending on if I'm compressed over here or compressed over here, what side of my brain is getting impacted negatively, which eye is getting impacted, like gravity matters. So because we've got this pull down to the earth and we're twisting one way or another, we're going to have something getting compressed and not getting properly fed and clean over time that's going to add up and create the diseases that we have. And that's why we all have different ways of aging and different things that we might have to encounter from a disease perspective. You know, if I'm compressed over here, maybe I have gut issues. If I'm compressed this way, maybe I have diabetes. If I've got this, you know, maybe I've got pain and other issues. So basically every issue in the body comes from an imbalance, comes from cells not being properly fed and clean. Because again, it comes down to ease of flow. If there's optimal space and we've got this beautiful diaphragm moving the fluids and everything into the body, into the cells, as well as moving the waste out of the body, then we're in this beautiful constant system. It's like taking that beautiful new sponge, and each time you use it, you wring it out, you fill it up with clean water, and then it goes back to being a sponge that can be, you know, clean and move. And you know, it's got this capacity to be elastic. You put it in the back of the cupboard, you put it in there dirty, you let it sit there for a year, you take it out, it's twisted and it's dry, and you can crack it and you see dust. So that's the aging body. We can be that young sponge that we constantly clean out by understanding how to continue to clean it. And that's the thing, like we keep accumulating all of these toxins and all of this negative energy into our bodies. And it's the exhalation that is the most significant way of moving that negative stuff out of us. So if we're not connected to that breath, we keep absorbing more and more and more and more. And there's a weight to that. And there's a size increase to that as well. So then we're slugging around with our movement, all of this added stuff that is a burden to our systems. And that's like making us toxic. So the key is really the breath, but the breath requires the alignment to be optimally functioning. You know, I can be twisted and I can start consciously breathing, but I'm only going to have access to a certain amount of that muscle. We need to release that so we can access that full plate, so that we can pull that air into all of the alveoli, so we can have optimal absorption as well as move all of the waste out so that we can keep our cells healthy and clean lifelong.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, pain is the language our body is letting us know that we're out of alignment or cells require something. So that's why it's interesting, as you said, like, hey, if I collapse more on my left side, maybe I do have like digestive issues or stomach issues. If I collapse more linearly forward, that could affect the pancreas more to the right, issues with the liver, like that definitely plays a massive, massive role. So there's different kinds of pain in the body, but really we all know what pain is. We just have to understand what it is and how to address it. So what are some of the most common pains? Like there's obviously low back pain is probably one of the most common pains. So let's stick to that, because if we get into the names of like diabetes and et cetera, that can get complicated. But why do you think low back pain is the most common area in the body to have pain?
Because nobody knows how to stand properly. Nobody knows how to understand proper cellular alignment. So when we look at the foundation, again, the feet and the calves, they're the furthest from the engine. So the way the fascia manipulates the foundation is the most impactful from that magnetic perspective. So we're like a building. We need to be structured and positioned in order to support the space within. Like I'm in a 30-story building. If there's an earthquake and the foundation gets tipped off balance, even the top floor at that penthouse, you're going to have everything tilting and everything is going to get drawn toward one side. So that is what's going to create pain in a body, is when our foundation is off. Because now as we start tipping off balance, for example, if I start pulling away on my right side, it's going to draw that left side of my body over into that system. So because again, the fascia is here to keep us upright, we're going to have all of these adhesions developing as the body is adjusting and changing. But now the muscles in the back left side of my body are having to fight that forward pull. So as we pull tissue into the front of the body, it's getting pulled from the back of the body. So we have all this kinetic energy constantly happening in the back of the body, all this potential energy getting pulled to the front of the body. So again, there's an imbalance. It's kind of like the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic system. We don't want to be just sympathetic or just parasympathetic. We need a balance. The sympathetic is the active, the parasympathetic is the rest and digest. We need both to be healthy. So as our body gets pulled off balance, everything falls in over here and is contracting constantly over here. So it's under incredible stress and it fatigues. And fatigue is the first thing that's going to let us know there's pain. If that stays for years and years and years, now we're going to actually have structural changes occurring. So if I'm constantly, as I said, if I'm always standing on that left leg, because that's my nature to fall into that, for me, it's the left side. So that right side is going to be under that pull. I might end up having a disc issue. The vertebrae are going to also get pulled and twisted. And then I might have a disc shooting out, affecting my sciatic nerve. Or now I've got a lot of inner tension in that right glute because that right side for me has to anchor to offset that pull on that left side. So that anchoring is going to create muscular tension, piriformis muscle included. Now it's going to put stress on that sciatic nerve and I can have radiating pain down the right side of my leg. So because our foundation is so variable when we're not conscious of it, that is impacting what's going on in the low back. And then that in itself is also pulling the rib cage forward and down. So now we have the whole weight of the body coming forward, straining the muscles in the low back. So because the core of the body between the rib cage and the pelvis, it's the only area really not supported by our skeleton. We've got the vertebrae, but it's not like a solid bone like the femur. So it's this area where we have this potential for optimal rotation and movement and to be able to breathe properly. But if we aren't aligned properly, it also is that center part that is under the most forces of nature and the most vulnerable.
Wow. I think the way you explain that could almost explain pain in all areas of the body. It's really is the same thing. Just as you explained that, though, specifically for the low back, that does make total sense.
Well, and as an athletic therapist, when I was working on clients all the time, I mean, you work on the backs of people's bodies for the most part, unless they had like some kind of another injury, like the hamstrings, the low back, the neck, the upper
You're
back.
You're just chasing pain at that point.
Because everything's getting pulled forward. So it's just exhausted.
Chase the cause sites, not the pain sites.
Yes.
That's what we need to do. And that's why people are so successful doing block therapy to manage their pain and to get out of pain. And they've tried everything under the sun and nothing has gotten them to the point where they can actually live without pain. Some things definitely help, but it really comes down to the decompressing the connective tissue and then rebuilding your posture, because you're talking a lot about posture and standing in correctly. And that's where it starts. Or maybe it starts from playing a sport at a very young age. And because I remember like playing hockey, I'm hunched forward all the time. My low back would be in pain after games all the time because I'm hunched forward. So all the muscles in my back are like, yo, like you got to come back. Like this is too much stress. So then you start going to the gym, then you start doing other things. Now you're not performing from correct alignment because your proprioception is off from what proper alignment should even be. So you think your shoulder blades are in alignment, but you're doing a bench press and then your right shoulder is actually internally rotated. Now you're jamming that right shoulder completely out. Similar with the squat, a deadlift, like all of the exercises. So that's why it's so important. And we're not saying you have to be perfect with your posture, with your alignment, with how you train and everything, but you need to start understanding where proper alignment should be, where we should be positioning ourselves throughout the day, and then start bringing that awareness into the gym or into any sport that you're doing and not to feel stress about it, being like, okay, I'm going to play golf. Oh, now this is ruining my body. You don't think of it like that. You can. That's a negative way of thinking. Obviously, the way we think is extremely important to how we feel and how our body actually responds. So the combination of enjoy what you're doing, because regardless, you're probably not going to stop and just keep having a blast. But just understand that we do need to decompress the connective tissue and start strengthening the body in more of that proper alignment, and breathe. Breathe properly, think positively, don't overthink things.
Well, and I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head with the breath part. So they say in yoga that we're born with a signature posture, and the goal of this lifetime is to break through that signature posture. We are born into this lifetime with our mother's breath. So if our mother, as we were developing, was calm, healthy, in a good relationship that was supportive, you're going to be coming out with a calm, loving breath. If that mother, as you're developing inside, was under stress and not healthy and maybe smoking or like whatever, right? That breath is the breath that you're going to be born with. And then you're pummeled with all of the forces of life in your own life up to this point. There's also vision. It's interesting because we're just about to launch our pet program. And one of our subjects that we started with had lost a little cute little one, had lost its eye 3 years prior to us meeting it. And you could see this twisted body because now imagine like covering one eye, your entire gait is going to have to change because your balance is going to have to be, everything is going to be off because of your vision. So it's never just one thing. And that's the thing about the fascia. It innervates everything, every single cell in the body. So it's how we sit, how we stand. It's the sports that we play, the instruments that we play, the relationships that we have. If you're in a stressful environment, you're going to be protecting. And it's funny because when we think of the emotional sides of the body, the right side is the masculine side, the left side is the feminine, the liver stores anger, the stomach stores sadness. So you can even relate the emotional state of people to how they're positioned. Am I blocking over here? Am I blocking over here? Was I in an upbringing where maybe my father would come home and he was always angry? So I'd be guarding and protecting myself because I don't want to feel that negative frequency coming in. So that guarding creates a holding pattern. And then if we're not breathing optimally, we're only going to be feeding some of the cells in the body. And even the nostrils, they're fascinating. There's a book called The Science of Breath that is so amazing. I think everybody should read it to understand this. But at the base of the nostrils, there's 3 turbinates to direct the airflow.
What's a turbinate?
It's the mechanics of the nostrils. They showed it as being like 3 little systems in the body where the air gets directed to. So the air coming in through the right nostril feeds the left side of the body and vice versa. So even look at the nostrils, because even the position of your head is going to affect the alignment of your nostrils. And if one is closed more than the other, if my left side is closed, I'm not going to have as much oxygen to the right side of the body, which is going to impact those cells and vice versa. And when I was a kid, I had nosebleeds for years, every day, only on my left side. So before I started this journey, I had a really asymmetrical crooked face because I was doing this like for 45 minutes a day for years at a time. And I've worked on that to correct and bring more balance and symmetry into my face. But I mean, that's the thing about the fascia. It's incredibly complex and mysterious and amazing, but also insanely simple when you look at it for what it is. It is the connection of every single thing that's going on in the body. And the goal is to release the pattern, pump blood and oxygen in, pull those cells back to alignment. And when we do that and we take away all of the complications and confusions around what's going on, then we can have a very systematic, direct approach to dealing with what ails us. And we can bring that body back into balance. And one thing people have to realize, though, is that you're going to feel the releases along the way. And that's the healing opportunity, the healing crisis, whatever you want. But whatever's in there that we've accumulated, we got to let it come out. And we're going to experience it on the way out, but not in a judgmental way. And that was the really cool thing when we did our trauma program, was we saw all these people having these phenomenal changes in their body and actually going back to moments when they might have had a traumatizing event and seeing it from a different perspective and having a healing. But it wasn't judgmental. It's not like they were like having to go back and relive some horrendous thing that they actually experienced or even saw. Funny enough, I was just listening to Greg Braden yesterday talking about how they've just discovered that in the heart, there are, I think they said 40,000 mirror neurons, which is actually brain tissue, but in the heart. And he was talking about how if you experience something or you see something, the brain doesn't recognize the difference. So that's pretty impactful to think about what that does. I mean, I think of these kids playing video games that are extremely violent. Your brain's not deciphering if you're actually experiencing that or playing a game, though.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because the PTSD...
That could go down a whole rabbit hole.
That'll be the next one we talk about.
Yeah, no kidding. That's spooky. I think a lot of what you just said makes so much sense. I think for the average listener, that could almost be overwhelming in a way, even for you and I, like just knowing that, hey, if we had a lot of nosebleeds when we were a kid, hey, if I shattered my ankle when I was 14, that can cause like tremendous issues all the way up the chain to my head. Like everything that we've experienced from when we're young till now, to our habits, to our patterns, to whatever, will affect us. But to make it really simple, we can undo our body exponentially faster than the way we've done ourselves up. So I think that's a really good thing for people to realize and understand. And to also, the first thing that you can do to start changing things is changing the pattern of your breath. Where are you breathing from? Start consciously breathing through your diaphragm, feeding your body with more oxygen, and lifting that rib cage out of your core if you're trapped. And then, of course, we make it very simple by teaching a program of fascia decompression, of block therapy, that you can just follow so that you can mindlessly kind of do this. And that's what we want to do. So don't get overwhelmed, because we're all messed up. Or and that's kind of the point. Like we're not going to be perfect going through this, but it's also, how are we going to respond to new things that are approaching us, or new traumas, or whatever the case is? And then how can we just continue to prevent certain things from happening?
And I loved what you said about how we can get out of this much faster, because the reason is if we have not been conscious, it has been a daily adding up over our lifetime in an unconscious way. When we start doing this work and becoming conscious, now we are taking direct action, and we have a very elaborate yet simple plan that can undo the past, bring balance into the life so that we can live a different future. And when we do that, again, like it's not about, none of us are going to live a pain-free, perfect life. And we wouldn't want to, because pain is a language. Like we need to feel pain. We don't want to numb that.
No pain, no pleasure.
Well, that's right. And pain isn't, we've been conditioned to believe pain is bad. Pain is actually, for some people, is beautiful. Like, I mean, people cut because they need to feel something. For people that are really numb in their life, pain becomes this grounding. And that's what it was for me, because I had so much anxiety.
And we're not saying cut.
No. I'm just saying that there's value to pain, though.
Totally.
And when I had anxiety, the reason that this resonated so much for me in that initial moment when I connected into my abdomen with my hand was because I encountered pain, but the pain grounded me from my anxiety.
100%.
And for me, when I've suffered from serious anxiety that I've had in the past, I would choose pain over that any day.
100% agree.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And because pain is something you can feel. And I mean, I'm not saying that we want to live in chronic pain. Obviously we don't, because it's extremely exhausting and it takes joy from life. Yet when we can use pain as a pathway back to balance, and we know what to do and how to do it, it is incredibly efficient and incredibly effective. And it's very empowering, because then suddenly you're not afraid of pain.
And that's why when you're doing block therapy, you're feeling pain, but you're feeling the pain that you're not consciously connected to all the time. So we're searching for that pain that we're unconsciously aware of in the body. Just like what you were saying, the potential energy compared to the kinetic energy, which is more, look, I'm learning something. And we need to find that pain, release it, understand it, let it go. Breathe properly through the diaphragm, give our cells what they need, and then the cells are going to respond positively. That's why a lot of people are like, after they do a 15-minute class, 30-minute class, hour and a half class, they're feeling euphoric. Why are they feeling euphoric? Because you just gave your cells the biggest hug, and that's exactly what they needed.
And also, we're tapping into that potential energy and we are unleashing it.
Right.
So that's the other cool thing. And the pressure fibers override the pain fibers. So you get to choose how much pain you allow with the guidance that your breath is your guide.
Yes.
So that's the other beautiful thing. Nobody's doing this to you. You are choosing it. And it's interesting because I think you and I have had this experience many times when I've been working on you. And I can tell that you're getting into that space of, okay, it's going too far. And I always ask you, do you want me to back off? And you're like, no, and you say no, because I gave you the power to say no or yes.
Right.
Or you have somebody pushing into you. So instead of like, if you've got a sore wrist and I'm pushing your wrist to that range of pain, oh, no, don't do it. Okay, I'm just going to be a wall. You push in until you don't like it. And then suddenly they're pushing way more because you've given them the control and the power.
Totally.
It's the fear piece. So when we're doing this work on ourselves on purpose, we take the fear away. And now pain is simply a language. And when we release that potential energy in the front and we allow all that inflammation that got stuck in those cells that became chronic and congested, and we release that potential, we send a whole bunch of energy through the body. We lift the body back up. That kinetic energy can start to calm down now because it's not having to work so hard to hold us up. And we start to create that balance within. And then every time you take a step forward, there's gifts to be had. So then suddenly those healing crises, they're not so bad anymore. Okay, you know what? I had a skin rash here, but now I have greater range of motion and my golf swing is better. So there's always gifts to those things too. So then you start realizing, I mean, it's like everything. Like when you go to the gym, you choose to put yourself to some level of discomfort
big time
all the time. So it's really no different than that. It's just a different understanding of the kind of pain. And then the value and the benefits are massive.
Absolutely. Wow. A lot has been said. That was a lot of information. So really the main difference, just to wrap this up, between posture and cellular alignment is we need to be able to release our connective tissue to give ourselves the opportunity to go to where they're supposed to be. Because you mentioned our cells have a spot where they're supposed to be located, but they just get pulled and drawn out of their rightful place from our connective tissue, which is a response of our posture. So we need to, of course, bring ourselves into good posture and alignment. But again, we first off need to start releasing the connective tissue. So release, then start breathing diaphragmatically and inflate those cells with more oxygen. Remember, oxygen is the number one essential nutrient our body requires to survive, thrive, recover, perform everything. And then we can start adapting and understanding the proper micro foundations and foundations to build up posture and how we should be positioning ourselves throughout the day. So, wow, we said a lot.
We did. And we could go on for more and more, but we'll do that next time.
That's why we have episodes.
Awesome.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you all in the next episode.